snow day talk. Here we go again. Snow coming in Buffalo, New York. It's going to be 10 to 20 inches with winds up to 50 miles an hour. Keep an eye on your flights. There's probably going to be delays and cancellations. One thing you might want to do in situations like today and tomorrow, if you're flying, check your airline's website because they might give you an opportunity to change your flight proactively. For example, JetBlue already knows that there's bad weather in the Northeast over the next 2-3 days. So if you go on the website right now, it will list the cities that are potentially affected, and then they give you the opportunity to change your flight between now and say Wednesday the 21st. And then, maybe pick a flight and time that will work for you. If you wait to the last minute to do it, the other people that were already ahead of you in the queue may have already filled up the seats that you could be considering. So probably it's first come, first serve. If you're flying from a city that has low temperatures and snow or ice, you might have to go to a de-icing process, and depending on the airport, that could be pretty lengthy. It could be half hour or an extra hour to your flight time, even though you're not in the air yet. Speaking of the Buffalo and Toronto International Airport, you might want to consider either or depending on where you're going. Lately, what I've been finding is the prices can really fluctuate between the two cities. Sometimes you could get great deals flying out of Toronto nonstop to specific airports. And likewise, same for Buffalo. So for one person, maybe it's not a huge difference in cost savings, but if you have a family of 4, it could be substantial. The other thing is I find that the prices flying out of Toronto, YYZ or YYZ, you want to use that airport code if you're flying overseas or long haul flights. Usually you get better options flying out of Toronto. You're going to get shorter flight times and you're going to get better prices. That's just my experience, but it's not always the case. But it's definitely worth comparing the two options. Just keep in mind too, the differences between flying on a Canadian airline versus a US airline. I find the Canadian carry-on bag situation is a lot less forgiving than when you fly on a US airline. For a US airline, I've seen like a huge massive bags go on in the overhead bins, and sometimes you wonder how people even made it on the plane with those bags, but they do. Well, it really depends on the airline too. So some airlines are a little bit stricter than others, let's just say. And then in Canada, they're like, I've had a little tote bag. I'm not kidding, like they were measuring and making you put it in the little measuring bin. There was one airline, like Flair Airlines, and they were measuring every single person in line, what they had for their tote bags or for carry-on suitcase. Anyway, I could go into stories about that, but I won't. Toronto International Airport is a massive airport. It's Canada's largest. Buffalo's a smaller airport. So some things to consider is in Toronto, you're going to need extra time from just the check-in counter to getting to your gate. Another thing too is if you're flying from Canada to a US destination, chances are that you're going to pre-clear customs. You're going to go through US customs in Canada so that you don't have to go through customs when you arrive in the US. But again, that's going to take extra time because that's one more layer you have to go through. If you're flying out of Buffalo to a US destination, well, there's no customs. If you were coming from Canada, you've already gone through customs at the land border. When you go to the check-in counter in Buffalo, go through security. If you have a Nexus card, it's even better. But the Buffalo airport is really convenient. It's a smaller airport, so it doesn't take long to get from the check-in counter to your gate. It depends which airline you're flying with. If you're flying with JetBlue, for example, their primary gates are 7 and 8, maybe 9 now. But as soon as you go through security, the gate's kind of right there to the right. But if you're flying on, say, Southwest, you're going to have to go further down the terminal. But still, it's not so far compared to in Toronto. Some of the walks are pretty long, especially when you arrive from an international destination. At the end of the day, for US domestic flights, I prefer flying out of Buffalo, New York. For international flights, I prefer to fly out of Toronto because there's more non-stop options. I find the prices are less expensive for the most part. Another airport to be on the lookout for is Hamilton, Ontario, YHM. Hamilton is somewhere in between Toronto and Buffalo. The airlines that are operating out of there are always changing. Right now there's a presence with WestJet and Porter. Air Canada has a situation where you can purchase your ticket and they have a shuttle bus between Hamilton and Toronto, but the flight's really leaving out of Toronto. That's good in the sense that if you have someone that's willing to drive you to an airport, but they don't want to drive to Toronto, they can drop you off in Hamilton and then you make your way from there. But I noticed that the shuttle times, it's not like they're going every hour or two. Sometimes the length of time between the arrival or departure from Toronto is quite a bit different from your arrival or departure from Hamilton. And really the drive shouldn't take more than an hour, but depending on traffic, who knows, right? Anything goes. I'm not sure of anybody who's actually used that service, but if you have, please leave a comment. But for the most part, I like using the Hamilton airport if I could get a nonstop flight, and sometimes the prices are very competitive, so that's great. And that's a convenient airport, and that's a small airport. I mean, you go through security and the gate's pretty much right there. It's a nice experience. Last time I flew out of there, it was one of those airports where you actually have to walk upstairs to get into the plane, as opposed to having the gate connected to the airport building. But I think they were going to be making improvements. I don't know if that's been implemented yet. That's just something to be aware of. We'll see you around in the next video.